there is a feeling of awe, the recognition of a power beyond the physical world, beyond our comprehension. The hushed, trembling, and speechless humility of the creature in the presence of whom? Of what? In the presence of that which is a mystery, inexpressible, and above all creatures.
Rudolf Otto, a prominent German theologian, sought to explore the essential experience that lies at the innermost core of the world religions. Rather than use the word holy, which he felt had too many moral connotations, Otto describes the heart of religious experience as the numinous, a profound sense of an awesome, transcendent mystery before which we tremble but are also fascinated by. He depicts the numinous as mysterium tremendum et fascinans, an overwhelming power erupting in human consciousness, eliciting humility and submission at our unworthiness as egoistic mortal creatures before the majesty of that which is supreme. An experience so forceful and so fascinating, it compels the recipient to seek union with this transcendent mystery and with ultimate reality. Mysticism has a rich history, and mystical experiences are recorded in the most ancient of religious traditions, right up to the present day. Mystics describing an ascent in consciousness, from darkness to light, from appearance to reality, a path, a way, an interior journey plunging into the deepest parts of our being through the annihilation of the self-centered ego to unity with ultimate reality. The term mysticism has its origins in ancient Greece, when about 2,500 years ago, secret ceremonies of purification and personal transformation known as the mysteries took place. During these rituals, initiates experienced profound states of altered consciousness, but were bound by a vow of silence not to speak of their experiences. The word mysticism is closely related to the word mute, deriving from the Greek to close one's mouth and eyes, signifying detachment from the world, concealment, the meaning rooted in darkness and in silence. The word mysticism is often misunderstood and used in a variety of inaccurate ways, wrongly associated with something misty or vague. But there's nothing misty or vague about mysticism. It has nothing to do with the occult, the supernatural, or magic. For while magicians create illusions, mystics strive to remove them. Mystics aren't warlocks or witches belonging to covens, nor do they cast spells or perform sacrifices, except perhaps the sacrifice of the ego. Their repetition of sacred words is for spiritual awareness, not for worldly powers or selfish gain. Nor is mysticism about visions or hearing voices, faith healing, exorcism, or the casting out of devils. Mystics don't try to communicate with the dead, neither do they indulge in astrology, telepathy, clairvoyance, or the reading of tarot cards, palms, or crystal balls. Neither is mysticism some new age fad followed by indulgent hippies, but a revered phenomenon with a long history demanding self-inquiry, discipline, persistence, and though often hidden, is evident in Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, and Taoism. When we look at the visible manifestations, the external or exoteric forms of these religions, they seem to be at odds with one another, each having different rituals, festivals, and doctrines. But if we explore more deeply, we find at their heart an inner, hidden, esoteric stream of teachings, not subject to the vagaries of place or time, but unchanging, eternal truths. Constituting a recurring, perennial philosophy, these teachings, as revealed by mystics through the ages about the meaning and purpose of human existence, are strikingly similar. Sometimes known as the great knowledge, the spirit of truth, these teachings have inspired men and women to dedicate their lives in the search for answers to the ultimate questions of human existence. What is truth? What is the meaning of life? Who am I? For mystics, this ultimate reality, whether called Allah in Islam, Brahman in Hinduism, Buddha nature in Buddhism, Ein Sof in Judaism, God in Christianity, or the Tao in Taoism, cannot be grasped by thought alone or expressed in words. Thoughts and words, by definition, create distinctions, duality, but mystics maintain all distinctions are illusory and the ultimate nature of reality is one. At the core of a mystical experience is an awakening to the numinous and the realization that essentially we're particles of a universe permeated by a conscious, intelligent energy, the essential self, indistinguishable from ultimate reality. This is expressed most succinctly in the Sanskrit formula found in the ancient Hindu Upanishads, Tat Tvam Asi, thou art that. The Atman, the immanent self, ultimately is one with Brahman, the absolute principle of all existence.
There is nothing in the cosmos that doesn't come from that one being. Of everything that exists, this being is the innermost self. It is the truth, the self supreme. And thou art that.
This experience of union with ultimate reality, or the divine, is also to be found within the Western mystical traditions of Islam, Christianity, and Judaism.
You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop.
The soul is in God, and God is in the soul.
There is a state in which the bonds of our personal nature of life fall away, and we experience undivided unity.
For mystics of all traditions, the material, phenomenal, and sensual world of matter as we ordinarily perceive it is only a partial manifestation of ultimate reality, in which all partial realities exist. We aren't creatures alienated by or separate from this ultimate reality, but essentially at one with it. And our true purpose on earth is to come to an intuitive knowledge of our inherent divinity and discover reality as it truly is, and not as our limited perceptions would have us believe. Human nature for the mystic isn't a single entity, but rather consists of two natures: the phenomenal, conditioned ego manifesting as our personality, which we chiefly identify with, and a non-phenomenal, essential self that yearns for union with the divine. Union that can be realized by surrendering the ego and submitting to the inexpressible mystery, and thus waking up to our true nature. Within mystical traditions are techniques aimed at aiding this transformation and inner awakening from the illusion of separateness. Practices requiring persistence and discipline, concentrated meditation, contemplative and centering prayer, the repetition of mantras, and the invocation of the holy names. Sufis, the mystics of Islam, for example, seek divine union with Allah through meditation, prayer, and dance. This way is associated with Rumi, a 13th century Persian poet and mystic who founded the Mevlevi order, famous for the whirling dervishes. Their sacred dance, known as the Sama, is a physical meditation, a ceremony in which dervishes aim to surrender to Allah and empty themselves of the ego, which distracts from the truth. They turn towards divine love by practicing zikir, prayers remembering Allah, spinning and turning in revolving circles, symbolically imitating planets orbiting the sun. The Sama is a spiritual journey, an ascent towards perfection, love, and service to creation and to all of humanity, irrespective of religion, class, or race.
You are the universe in ecstatic motion. Everything in the universe is within you. The ego is a veil between you and God. Become nothing, and He will turn you into everything.
For Teresa of Avila, a 16th century Spanish nun, a life of prayer can similarly lead to union with God. In describing the stages of prayer, Teresa uses the metaphor of a garden to represent the spiritual journey. The garden, initially arid, unfruitful, and full of weeds, is transformed through prayer and by God's grace. The weeds uprooted and replaced by fragrant flowers and fruitful plants. Teresa views the soul as a castle containing 7 mansions. In the first 4 mansions, prayer is directed towards self-knowledge, humility, and active attention, and a deep yearning for the indwelling of the divine presence. In the 4th mansion, she experiences the taste of divine delight, detachment from the ego, and interior freedom, while in the 5th and 6th mansions, she experiences ecstatic union with God, a spiritual marriage. The 7th and final mansion, the highest possible state of prayer, ends with the soul transformed and permanently absorbed within the divine.
That which God communicates to the soul in an instant is so great a secret and so sublime a grace, and what she feels is such an excessive delight that I know nothing to compare it to, except that our Lord is pleased at that moment to manifest to her the glory which is in heaven, and this He does in a more sublime way than by any vision or spiritual delight.
Mystical experiences can't be adequately described in words, and so defining mysticism is notoriously difficult. Nonetheless, while acknowledging a full understanding can only be grasped through direct experience, some scholars have attempted a definition. Walter Stace, a British pioneer in the philosophical study of mysticism, considered mystical experiences to be different from other forms of religious experience, in that they are non-sensuous and utterly formless, timeless, soundless, spaceless, selfless. Yet, through direct inner experience and intuition, they can expand awareness, bringing with them a sense of the sacred and ultimately union with the one reality. Stace distinguishes between extroverted mystical experiences, ones that look outward through the senses, and introverted mystical experiences, which are a turning inwards. Extroverted mystical experiences view the phenomenal material world of objects as mystically transformed, the mystery of ultimate reality revealed, shining through the world. Extroverted mystical experiences aren't necessarily related to any religious tradition, nor can they be induced, but are often spontaneous events, moments of pure intuitive perception and altered states of consciousness. Although elusive and often fading quickly, such experiences can be deeply significant, often transforming the recipient's outlook on life. The American author Sophie Burnham describes such an experience in the Andes Mountains in Peru while visiting an Aztec temple.
Suddenly, I was immersed in a sweetness words can't express. Wave after wave of light washed over me. But this is wrong because I was the light as well, swallowed in the light. How long that lasted, I don't know, but I knew things that today I can't even relate. The impression of knowing beyond knowledge. The feebleness of words. It was knowledge untranslatable. But one image remains. Sparks of light like angels, atoms, and electrons dancing behind the light, themselves composed of the divine, every particle singing wildly in its joy. I didn't see God, that would have blinded me, but I saw the bending of the grasses at the passing of the hem of his garments. Everything alive with praise and unfathomable love.
Introverted mystical experiences aren't spontaneous events, but the fruits of long practice and discipline, particularly contemplative and meditation techniques. The introverted experience is a turning inwards, a plunging into the very depths of consciousness, and becoming aware of awareness itself, wherein lies the key to awakening.
I am aware of thoughts, but am not myself a thought. I am aware of feelings and sensations, but am not myself a feeling or a sensation. Yet, whatever the content of experience is, I am aware of it. The nature of awareness doesn't share the destiny or the limits of the body or the mind. It's eternal, infinite. And becoming aware of awareness is the essential element in all knowledge.
One of the most important commentators on religious experience was William James, an American philosopher and pioneering psychologist. In his most famous work, Varieties of Religious Experience, James asserts that mystical experiences lie at the very heart of all religious and spiritual traditions, and in general exhibit 4 characteristics. The recipient of a mystical state senses the suspension of their will as if in the grasp of a superior power, an intuition of being in the presence of something higher, a something that demands gracious submission. Such experiences are ineffable, inexpressible, because ordinary language is inadequate. The finite can't describe the infinite. Though unable to represent their experiences in words, or indeed demonstrate their validity, to the beneficiary they are valid and self-evident. Although in themselves transient and short-lived, their impact can be long-lasting and life-changing. They are noetic, conveying objective knowledge, revealing truths inaccessible to the conditioned mind.
Our waking consciousness is but one special type of consciousness. Whilst all about it, parted from it by the filmiest of screens, there lie potential forms of consciousness entirely different. No account of the universe in its totality can be final, which leaves these other forms of consciousness disregarded.
British scholar Frederick Happold provided a context to explain mystical experiences by separating them into the mysticism of love and union and the mysticism of knowledge and understanding. While Happold acknowledges these two types of experience often overlap, each one is distinguished by its own predominant impulse. The mysticism of love and union is born out of the enduring human yearning to be free from the acute sense of separation we feel as small, finite selves in an immense universe. Deep down, all humans long to overcome this sense of estrangement and existential loneliness, a yearning that evokes within the human spirit the organic urge to reunite with something greater. Happold observes that as human beings we cling onto selfhood and self-love, reluctant to give them up, yet at the same time have an inherent longing for reunion and a return to that from which we feel we've come, calling us pilgrims of eternity, creatures in time, but citizens of a timeless world. The mysticism of knowledge and understanding, on the other hand, springs from the urge to know, the impulse to grasp the secret of life and its ultimate purpose, to understand it not in parts, but in wholeness. This way, sometimes called experimental wisdom or experimental knowledge, is established by direct experience and relies not on deductive reasoning or analytical philosophy to understand, but on intellectual illumination, an intuitive, unifying vision that pierces to life's secrets. Thomas Aquinas, for example, the greatest philosopher and theologian of the Christian Middle Ages, who during his lifetime wrote over 8 million words in 60 books, after a mystical experience said, "I can write no more. Everything I've written seems to me as straw in comparison with what I've seen." Happold categorizes mysticism as having three aspects which again, he suggests, sometimes overlap. God mysticism, the return of the spirit or real self to its infinite source, is found in Eastern traditions, particularly Hinduism, the true self or Atman absorbed into absolute reality, Brahman. God mysticism is evident too within Western traditions, particularly Orthodox Christianity, with the understanding that the Son of God became man so we might become God, the incarnation of God through Jesus Christ, making us potentially godlike to the same degree as God himself became man. As such, the soul is deified in a transformational process known as theosis, the purified human soul becoming holy and divine, analogous to metal fired in a furnace, and although acquiring all the properties of the fire, its heat and its light, in its essence remains the same metal. One monastic practice in this journey towards theosis is known as Hei Sochia, stillness, sought through an emptying of selfhood, the quietening of the senses, and the unceasing, continuous inner prayer of the heart. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me. Happold's second category is nature mysticism, characterized by the sense of the immanence of God or the soul in nature, experienced as the all in the one, and the one in the all, evident in some poetry.
And I have felt a presence that disturbs me with the joy of elevated thoughts, a sense sublime of something far more deeply interfused, whose dwelling is the light of setting suns, and the round ocean, and the living air, and the blue sky, and in the mind of man, a motion and a spirit that impels all thinking things, all objects of all thought, and rolls through all things.
Third category, soul mysticism, emphasizes the numinous, hidden quality of the soul, which seeks union by complete isolation from everything which is not the soul. This way is associated, among others, with the medieval German theologian and mystic Meister Eckhart. During the Inquisition, Eckhart was tried as a heretic by the Roman Catholic Church for spreading dangerous doctrines among the common folk, but his teachings have since echoed down the ages, and today he's regarded as a spiritual master in many traditions, including Zen Buddhism. When Eckhart said, "God, rid me of God," he wasn't denying God, as his accusers maintained, but rather rejecting all ideas, images, and concepts about God, which limited true understanding. He wrote,
If I could understand God, I wouldn't regard him as God. To be full of things is to be empty of God. To be empty of things is to be full of God.
For Eckhart, God is a hidden God, buried deep in the innermost depth of the soul, the ground of the soul, where the soul's ground and God's ground are one. Paradoxically, one must seek God nowhere, not out there or in the created world, but in this uncreated ground, which Eckhart names as the light of the soul, the fortress of the soul, the refuge, the wilderness, the silent desert. For Eckhart, by rooting oneself in the groundless ground of all things, contemplation is at heart the practice of detachment, a path towards transcendence beyond all images and earthly attachments. Using the metaphor of a desert to represent detachment, Eckhart taught that only by turning one's attention within, emptying oneself of self, and abandoning all thoughts and perceptions, can one experience this inner field of pure consciousness, pure awareness, pure being, which Eckhart calls God. Eckhart's Christianity doesn't emphasize faith or belief, but is concerned with an inner, experiential process of regeneration, an awakening to the eternal birth within. It's not an intellectual process, it goes beyond intellect, but is a journey whereby the soul's spark, that inner transcendent faculty, awakens to the divine. This path, the way of unknowing, in Eckhart's word, lures one away from all external knowledge and away from oneself.
In this birth, God flows into the soul with such dazzling light that God and the soul merge into one spirit, one essence, one being. So root yourself in the ground of contemplation and lay no claim to anything. Let go of yourself and let God act for you and in you. Having abandoned yourself, God installs himself in your nature. When, self-bereft of all belongings, you take to the desert. There, as it is written, is a voice crying in the wilderness. Let this eternal voice cry on in you at its sweetest and become a desert in respect to yourself and to all things.
We are all the kindred of the mystics. Strange and far away from us though they seem, they're not cut off from us by some impassable gulf. They come back to us from an encounter with life's most august secret, filled with amazing tidings, which they can hardly tell. For these lovers of the Absolute, the winter is over, and life, new, unquenchable and lovely, comes to meet them with the dawn.
The most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the source of all art and science. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer pause to wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. His eyes are closed.
The origins of art and science can be traced back to the earliest human efforts to understand the mysteries of the natural world. Prehistoric cave paintings over 30,000 years old illustrate humanity's innate curiosity and creativity. The caves, both ceremonial spaces and portals to the spirit world. Throughout early history, this sense of a world infused with spiritual energy was central to human culture. Elders and shaman priests transmitting sacred knowledge through the oral tradition, ceremonies and storytelling, describing an interconnected, living and purposeful universe. 6,000 years ago, the world's first civilization emerged in Mesopotamia, heralding the beginning of natural philosophy, the forerunner of what we know today as science. Natural philosophers, in developing observational techniques and mathematical methods, understood the universe as permeated by divine intelligence and power, while mystical practices sought to uncover the deeper mysteries hidden within the world, their revelations shaping a collective consciousness about the workings of the cosmos and the nature of reality. Natural philosophy was also prevalent in ancient Egypt. Mystical practices used to invoke divine power for spiritual enlightenment. In ancient China, Taoist mystical teachings emphasize harmony with the Tao, the way, through cultivation of the life force permeating the cosmos. And at the heart of ancient Indian thought and natural philosophy was the concept of Brahman, the transcendent and immanent principle pervading the universe, the source and sustainer of all existence. 3,000 years ago in ancient Greece, Pythagoras taught the planets and the stars move in harmonious accord with the elegant precision of mathematical equations in relationships of mystical significance. For Plato, beyond the physical world of appearances is a realm of transcendent, eternal forms or ideas, accessible to the intellect or the soul through contemplation and philosophical intuition. Greek and Jewish ideas fed through to the emergence of Christianity around 2,000 years ago. Grounded in the teachings of the Bible and the authority of the Church, beliefs centered around cosmic harmony and a hierarchical order extending from the divine realm to the natural world, each level of existence having its place and purpose within the overarching structure of the universe. From the motion of the stars to the smallest insects, birds and flowers, natural philosophers understood the world and all organic life as displaying design, inherent purpose and order, the complexity and beauty evidence of divine intelligence and worthy of respect. A sacred worldview that remained unchallenged for thousands of years.
The mystic is content to bask in the wonder and revel in a mystery that we're not meant to understand. The scientist feels the same wonder, but is restless, not content, recognizes the mystery as profound, then adds, but we're working on it. We are survival machines, robot vehicles blindly programmed to preserve the selfish molecules known as genes.
Contemporary culture often dismisses mystical experiences as subjective imaginings of whimsical dreamers, unwilling to accept we're essentially gene machines, selflessly struggling for existence in an ultimately meaningless world. Such opinions have their origins in the European scientific revolution of the 16th and 17th centuries, when a view of reality emerged, dramatically overthrowing traditional understanding of a sacred, purposeful universe. The catalyst for this revolution was the publication in 1543 of Nicholas Copernicus's On the Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres. Copernicus proposed the Sun and not the Earth is at the centre of the solar system, later confirmed by Galileo's observations, a view fundamentally upending the timeless assumption of our unique cosmic significance at the centre of the universe. In the ensuing intellectual climate of the 17th century, the French philosopher René Descartes provided new tools for scientific inquiry by introducing methods of doubt and skepticism in the search for certainty. The Cartesian view of reality, completely dualistic, mind and matter, two distinct substances, and the universe understood as a mathematical machine. In 1687, Isaac Newton published the Principia, a description of the laws governing this machine, from a falling apple to planets orbiting the sun, likening the universe to a huge clock governed by precise and predictable mathematical principles. This mechanistic understanding of reality, one in which only matter mattered, was in direct contrast to the ancient worldview. The planet and everything in it no longer was considered to be an integral part of an interconnected web, but inanimate, lifeless, composed of separate objects. Today's environmental crisis, undoubtedly a consequence of such thinking. Yet this mechanistic model was so dominant and so successful in driving science, technology, and the Industrial Revolution forward that many scientists believed physics itself was nearly complete. Newton himself, however, thought differently.
I don't know what I may appear to the world, but to myself I seem to have been only like a boy playing on the seashore, diverting myself in finding a smoother pebble or a prettier shell than ordinary, whilst the great ocean of truth lay undiscovered before me.
Scientific understanding is dynamic, never static, and no scientific theory is safe from the next generation of scientists with the next generation of tools. In the early years of the 20th century, the Newtonian mechanistic view of reality was challenged by Einstein's theories on space-time and gravity, and by Max Planck's discovery of energy quanta. Planck's findings were a complete departure from classical physics, revealing subatomic reality not as matter, but as probability patterns, interconnected and enfolded in dynamic relationships within a cosmic network. Here was a realm of such paradoxes that physicists could no longer speak with confidence about physical reality, only a probability. A realm so uncertain that Einstein himself questioned it, saying, "God doesn't play dice with the world." Quantum theory is counterintuitive, opening a Pandora's box of even deeper mysteries. Particles appearing neither here nor there, but in both places at once, yet everywhere in between, as waves, not objects, and uncertainty maintained until you observe them, at which point they conveniently adopt a single location, popping in and out of existence, travelling through barriers and becoming inextricably entangled even when they're light years apart. An enigmatic realm, not only stranger than we think, but according to Werner Heisenberg, a pioneer in quantum mechanics, also stranger than we can think. Trying to make sense of this intriguing new reality, some physicists, notably Heisenberg and Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, believed this new physics isn't new at all, but rather represented a refinement of mystical wisdom as revealed down the ages. Heisenberg and Oppenheimer, among some other physicists, found compelling comparisons between quantum and mystical revelations of a fundamental unity and interconnectedness at the deepest levels of reality. Quantum mechanics, too, suggests the observer plays an integral role in the manifestation of reality, reflecting mystic views of the interconnectedness of consciousness and the nature of reality itself. While mystical teachings and quantum mechanics both acknowledge the paradoxical nature of ultimate reality, challenging dualistic and reductionist approaches in the search for truth. Such speculative comparisons are rejected by many scientists, who dismiss it as pseudoscience, quantum quackery, born out of weak analogical reasoning and intellectual sloppiness, merely filling in the gaps of scientific uncertainties with mystical ones. Yet although a page from a journal of experimental physics is as mysterious to the uninitiated mystic as the Upanishads is to the uninitiated physicist, Both disciplines pursue precise and sophisticated tools of observation. The mystic looking inwards, the physicist looking outwards. Although making comparisons between the two disciplines remains controversial, the resemblances are undoubtedly intriguing, as science reveals ever more deeper mysteries, ones not altogether unfamiliar to mystics.
If a mystic admits that the object of his vision is something that can't be described, then he must also admit he's bound to talk nonsense when he describes it.
At the heart of the scientific methods of observation, experimentation, and analysis is the theory of knowledge known as empiricism. The assertion that true knowledge is derived from direct sensory experience and empirical evidence. Empiricists are skeptical of mystical claims because they can't be tested or verified through sense experience. David Hume, a leading 18th century exponent, proclaiming such experiences are illusory and should be committed to the flames. For modern science, empiricism is the ultimate arbiter of truth. But does the sensual world as we experience it represent the whole truth and nothing but the truth? Our senses sometimes deceive us and are always restricted by our biology. Our eyes, for example, responding to less than a trillionth of the vast electromagnetic spectrum, and creatures conscious of other forms of radiant energy live in completely different worlds from us. Our knowledge of reality is relative to the evolutionary capacity of our organs of perception and limited by our consciousness. Modern science indicates, as does the mystic tradition, that our ordinary experience is only a partial manifestation of reality, and beyond our sense experience is an invisible dimension, a realm in which, in some very real sense, we contain within us the laws, elements, forces and energies at play in the great universe. For the mystic, knowledge of the reality beyond the world of appearances isn't to be found by the senses or by the intellect alone, but by the extension of consciousness, generating an inner empiricism, an intuitive wisdom, something not unfamiliar to the scientist.
I didn't arrive at my understanding of the fundamental laws of the universe through my rational mind. The intellect has little to do on the road to discovery. There comes a leap in consciousness, call it intuition or what you will. The solution comes, and you don't know how or why. It's entirely possible that behind the perception of our senses, worlds are hidden of which we are unaware.
The question, who am I, lies at the very heart of spiritual and scientific endeavour. Science has approached this mystery by exploring, at ever more microscopic levels, the workings of the human machine. Its organs, cells, atoms and electrons. Yet, under the microscope, the man or woman disappears, for our experience of ourselves, the drama of who we are, plays out not just in the visible world, but in our invisible world of thoughts, feelings and perceptions. Attempting to understand this invisible domain Sigmund Freud, an Austrian neurologist, published The Interpretation of Dreams in 1899. Focusing on the role of early childhood experiences and the interplay between conscious and unconscious mental states, Freud dismissed spirituality as a comforting illusion and mystical experiences, blissful, confusing hallucinations. For Freud, mystical states don't arise from any transcendent source, but are unconscious remnants or infantile dependency, arising from repressed unconscious primitive desires. Any profound mystical feelings of interconnectedness or unity he discounted as simply a regression to and a remnant of the very earliest experience of union felt by the infant at the mother's breast. Carl Gustav Jung, a pupil of Freud and himself a distinguished psychologist, disagreed with Freud's interpretation. Jung attributed mystical experiences as an encounter with the collective unconscious, the deepest layer of the unconscious mind, shared by all humanity, containing universal symbolic patterns, images, and themes known as archetypes, often experienced in dreams. By providing insights into these deeper layers of the psyche, Jung's analysis paved the way for new approaches in understanding the significance of mystical states and their potential in promoting psychological wholeness. Jung was deeply interested in the world's spiritual traditions, and although he never claimed to be a mystic himself, his findings based on his own inner empiricism and those of his patients often had mystical overtones.
How is it that anything so remarkable as a state of consciousness comes about as the result of irritating nervous tissue is just as unaccountable as the appearance of the genie when Aladdin rubbed his lamp?
I know I exist, because as Descartes famously said while doubting his own existence, I think, therefore I am. Consciousness is indisputable. I am my subjective interior awareness, my thoughts, feelings, sensations, perceptions, each with its unique subjective character. There's something it's like for me to experience each state, what some philosophers call qualia, an invisible, accessible, and phenomenal awareness of myself. This thing we know as consciousness. But what is this quality? Does consciousness arise from matter, as materialists assert? Or is matter the result of consciousness, as mystics claim? Since Descartes distinguished between mind and matter, scientists and philosophers have puzzled over this dynamic relationship. Newton himself pondering the mystery back in 1693, saying it's inconceivable inanimate brute matter should produce consciousness without the intervention of something else which is not material. And 300 years later, the cosmologist Stephen Hawking asked, what is it that breathes fire into physicists' equations and their hypotheses of reality?
It seems to many people that consciousness is a mystery, the most wonderful magic show imaginable, an unending series of special effects that defy explanation. I think they're mistaken. Consciousness is a physical, biological phenomenon, exquisitely ingenious in its operation, but not miraculous or even, in the end, mysterious.
While scientists like Daniel Dennett understand consciousness as arising from matter, others, given modern findings in the quantum and cosmological realms, maintain the material universe is in fact a product of consciousness.
Consciousness is fundamental, and the material universe is a product of consciousness. The universe begins to look more like a great thought than like a great machine.
Today, neuroscience seeks to find the seat of consciousness, science's most epic challenge and perhaps most intractable mystery. Despite ever more sophisticated technologies throwing light on the stupendous complexity and dynamic interaction of the 86 billion neurons and the 100 trillion synaptic connections in the human brain, the question remains: how does this lump of soggy grey matter we call the brain give rise to the technicolored, staggering intensity of our subjective experiences? Tantamount, one philosopher quipped, turning water into wine. While modern technologies can identify brain regions and patterns of neural activity associated with altered states of consciousness, such correlations don't amount to explaining consciousness, and a theory of consciousness remains as elusive as ever. Increasingly, scientists wonder whether the mystery will ever be explained by reducing it to something measurable, because measurement exists only relative to consciousness itself, raising the question, can observers of such a deeply embedded subjective phenomenon as consciousness observe consciousness objectively? For mystics, consciousness isn't a problem to be solved, but rather a state to be realized. Using their own long-established tools of disciplined inner observation, experimentation, and analysis, they seek what Buddhists call luminous mind, and Hindus absolute mind. While mystical revelations can't replace scientific ones, nor be taken as proof of any theoretical framework of physical reality, their insights into consciousness, untarnished by the analytic sensual mind, may perhaps offer some insights into the mystery.
Now I shall tell you the nature of this absolute mind. There is a self-existent reality, which is the basis of consciousness. That reality pervades the universe. That reality is the knower of all states of consciousness. It is your real self, a reality pervading the universe. It alone shines.